So while everyone's trying to introduce themselves, I will pass the floor to Johnson Asante-Twum. He is IANSA's managing director to give us the welcoming remarks. So Johnson, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for having me. I'm happy to be here this morning, and thank you everyone for making time to join this meeting. By way of introduction, my name is Johnson Asante-Twum. Um, work as a managing director of IANSA together with the staff who are also here, as you can see, Ellie and Emily, who all work hard around the clock for IANSA, with many members that we work with. As you may be aware, I'm speaking to you from Ghana, in West Africa to be specific, where it's about 8 minutes past 3 a.m. And that is the beauty of IANSA. I dare say, if I'm not mistaken, that where IANSA is, it appears that the sun doesn't set, because it is 3 a.m. here, and I'm sure that in Latin America it's probably sometime there. And so by the time some of us are going to bed, others are waking up, and that is what makes IANSA a unique organization. Distinguished participants, IANSA members, hardworking staff of IANSA, organizers Bianca and your team, partners, and all other protocol duly observed. By way of introduction, let me say that International Action Network on Small Arms is a coalition of NGOs with hundreds of members in civil society organizations campaigning to stop the proliferation of small arms misuse and abuse, and working particularly in the global south to prevent gun violence. We draw on the practical experience of our members to campaign for policies that will promote human security. And IANSA probably the only international civil society coalition working in small arms control issues, headquartered in the global south, and as I mentioned earlier, Ghana to be specific. Permit me at this point to welcome all of you to this very all-important meeting, looking back to move forward, and appreciate your dedication and commitment to the fight against proliferation of small arms in particular, and their related materials. I dare say that your presence here is a testament of your resolve and commitment to this cause. And as you may be aware, if we are all looking back, we would realize that we have won several significant victories by standing together as people who have been affected and witnessed the devastating effects of poorly regulated trade in and management of small arms and light weapons and their ammunition, which is very important to us. At IANSA, we do not want to separate ammunition in particular from small arms, because we believe that ammunition of small arms and light weapons is like the fuel for the vehicle, and without which the vehicle cannot move. And if you bring it to modern day EV, means that without the batteries that will charge the vehicle, it will not move. And so there is no point in dealing with the issues of weapons without looking critically at the ammunition and how they can also be controlled as we work around to control small arms and light weapons. If I talk about victories, I speak of the UN PoA, the various regional instruments, the firearms protocol, the arms trade treaty, and lately the global framework on conventional ammunition. The role of civil society in proposing and adopting these instruments have been documented and acknowledged globally. However, I believe that there is more ahead to be achieved, and there are many more lessons we can learn from to enable us better improve our advocacy and lobbying activities and to raise the needed resources to implement these advocacy activities. We have a responsibility to see to the effective implementation of these treaties and instruments by partnering with states, regional and international organizations in this direction. It is our belief that um, we can provide the needed support and resources for our members to engage governments, parliamentarians, and other officials constructively and on the basis of facts and knowledge in implementing their commitment to these instruments in our various states. IANSA has several publications which can serve as reference materials for your engagement. And these materials are made available free of charge on our website, www.iansa.org. Let me at this juncture acknowledge our partners, the European Union and the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, for providing the necessary support financially for the past few years that we have been working, and particularly for workshops like these ones. I want to thank you all for your attention and thank my staff and also Bianca and your team, and for all of you for making time to join this very important meeting. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Johnson. Let's give Johnson a virtual round of applause so you can use your react buttons for that. And thank you everyone for typing in and introducing yourselves as well through the group chat. So we see people coming in from India, Sri Lanka, the Philippines. We see including from Miriam College here. If you see the camera, there's a group of students who are tuning in. So hello, thank you for joining. And we have participant from Bangladesh as well, and I think Indonesia. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much again for making the time today. I will be presenting the overview of the seminar before we start with our speakers. Just to orient everyone, we've shared this in our invitation. So what do we expect today? We have 3 speakers in the room discussing 3 topics. So we have gender and disarmament, we have emerging technology in small arms and light weapons, and third, youth and disarmament. So we see a lot of young people in the room, so hopefully we got a lot of questions on topic number 3. And then we will wrap up with a Q&A discussion. So we really encourage everyone to ask questions. This is a safe space and this is a learning space. So if you have any question, there are no wrong questions here. So please feel free to reflect and to write down questions for our final session. And we hope to close by 11:30 a.m. Indochina time. And without further ado, I will pass the floor to our first speaker. Speaking on gender and disarmament is Ms. Ida Scarpino, the Political Affairs Officers and Conventional Arms Lead in UNODA's Regional Center in Asia and the Pacific, UNRCPD. Ida, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi, Bianca. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your introduction, and thank you so much for your invitation. It's really a pleasure to reconnect with so many friends and colleagues I can see also in the participant list, and especially to continue to work together with IANSA. So thanks a lot for organizing this important event, and also to give me the opportunity to be here with you and represent UNRCPD. For those who don't know me, my name is Ida Scarpino. As Bianca said, I'm Political Affairs Officer at UNRCPD, which is basically the regional center of the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs. And we are based in Kathmandu. And from Kathmandu, we oversee more than 50 countries across 6 sub-regions as of today. I know that I only have 15 minutes, so I have a few slides that I would like to share with you. Allow me to share my screen. And we should be ready. Do you see my presentation?
We see it, Ida. Perhaps presentation mode?
Okay, let me do that. How about now?
There,
Can
perfect.
you see full presentation mode? Okay, perfect. So I was provided with some guiding questions by our colleagues at IANSA. So this is the structure of the presentation. So I was asked, first of all, why we talk about the gender and disarmament, why gender is important to disarmament with a particular focus on small arms weapons control. So I would like to start with an introduction of the gender impact of armed violence, but also the attitudes toward weapons and social dynamics. And then also I would like to reflect on gender equality in disarmament and arms control. And what are the progress? Because this was one of the questions also I was provided. And to answer that, I would like to refer to the normative framework, particularly focusing on small arms weapons control and highlight the achievements, but also some setbacks and some challenges that are still there, and also recent trends. And I would like to conclude by highlighting the regional center's work on gender and disarmament, and also opportunities for civil society organizations engagement. As I said, starting with the armed conflict and the gender impact, as you know, and this is not something new, women, girls, men and boys are affected differently in times of war, in conflict-affected situation. And we have seen that especially women and girls are disproportionately affected because they bear the long-term and social and economic impacts. For instance, one evidence is that in conflict-affected situations and countries, millions of girls are out of schools. They have no prospect of training or financial independence. And these exacerbate further inequalities. Also in some countries, and this is a consideration at the global level, but unfortunately we have seen that also in our region, in some countries, extremists and military actors have taken power by force, and also erasing or cancelling or reducing previous commitment on gender equalities. And I think we are all experiencing right now and seeing that unfortunately there is a shift away from inclusive politics nowadays, and that topics and dynamics and perspectives such as misogyny and authoritarianism are mutually reinforcing. Just to provide you with some evidence supporting the considerations of the previous slide, I would like to take a moment to highlight the report, the latest report of the UN Secretary General on children and armed conflict. And as you can see in my slide, in 2023, children continue to be disproportionately affected by armed conflict, and the number of children verified as affected by grave violations increased compared to 2022. And the number is 32,990 grave violations observed by the Secretary General. And the highest number of grave violations were verified in Israel, the occupied Palestinian territory, DRC, Myanmar, Somalia, Nigeria, and Sudan. And unfortunately, one of the conclusions of this report is that the situation is expected to worsen vis-a-vis some negative trends that we have been observing. And especially in our region, we have seen some adoptions of restrictive laws and very conservative laws in countries such as Afghanistan, but also Myanmar. Other data as evidence to these considerations can be taken from the latest report of UNODC and UN Women on gender-related killings of women and girls. By the way, I will share the link to these reports in the chat box later on, so you can also take a look. So globally, UN Women and UNODC estimated that globally almost 90,000 women and girls were killed intentionally in 2022. And almost the majority of these killings were gender motivated. And women and girls worldwide, and almost 50,000 women and girls worldwide were killed by their intimate partners or other family members. So that means that girls and women, they're not even safe. Actually, they are at greater risk in their households, which is very alarming then in a context where small arms circulate illegally. And then while most homicides worldwide are committed against men and boys, 80% in 2022, women and girls are disproportionately affected because they represent approximately 53% of all victims of killing in their house and 66% of all victims of intimate partner killing. And if you have a look at the report, you will see that it contains some case studies and also some focus on specific regions. But unfortunately, there are not a lot of data in Asia and the Pacific. So this is just a reminder that we should do more on data collection, especially in our region, to understand the full picture. As I said, violence, but also I would like to say something about the attitudes, the gender norms also that are influencing the disarmament and arms control realm. So as you know, the notion, the concept of militarism has been always associated with the gender norm of masculinity, and these are also affected armament and disarmament policies. And also the possession of weapons and also the preparedness to use military action have always been linked and associated with the masculine characteristics of control, power, domination, and strength. And on the other side, some gender stereotypes, for instance, women often associated with the soft team, has led to the underrepresentation of women in this field, because as we all know, disarmament, arms control related fields are men dominated, and part of this situation is also explained through the influence of gender norms, masculinity, femininity, and these led to the risk of gender blindness and negatively impacted the goals of peace and security operations. Because it failed to take into account the differences between women, girls, men, and boys, but also it failed to have inclusive approaches. Now I would like to move to the normative framework, because as I said, I also would like to talk about progress on how gender has been integrated into arms control and disarmament. And I would like to do that from the perspective of the normative framework and from the perspective of a series of political, but also legal commitments that states and other stakeholders have taken to integrate gender into their small arms or disarmament-related work. And I would like to focus on the UN Program of Action on Small Arms-Related Weapons Control, a politically binding instrument that, as you know, it was adopted in 2001, and states committed to take a series of measures to enhance stockpile management, to enhance import-export control, to enhance weapons tracing, and also in line with other global agendas. And then also the Arms Trade Treaty, which is a legally binding instrument governing arms trade. And it is the only legally binding instrument, and also the first legally binding instrument establishing a link between arms trade and the risk of arms being used to commit gender-based violence, violence against women, and human rights violation. And as you can see in these slides, these frameworks on disarmament, arms control, and also small arms weapons, they're all they are divided between legally and politically binding, but they also are interconnected. And one of the progress that we have seen at the multilateral level is that all these instruments in the last decades, they've been cross-referencing each other to increase synergy at the implementation level. So the program of action, as I said, was adopted in 2001. But when it was adopted, it only had one reference in the preamble to the gendered impact of small arms weapons proliferation. And he highlighted the negative impact on women, children, and also elderly. But in the last 20 years, through the different meetings of states, because as you might know, states meet every 2 years and every 6 years to assess progress with implementation of the program of action, but also to assess the relevance of the text adopted in 2001 to the current reality. And through these meetings and through the outcome documents of this meeting, biennial meeting of states, review conferences, states progressively integrated gender in the implementation of the program of action by committing to a series of measures such as collection of data, sex and age and disability data related to the illicit proliferation, the use, misuse of small arms and weapons, and also to increase funding for policies and programs that take account of the differing impact of small arms and weapons on the entire population, and also to promote exchange of national experiences and interagency cooperation between the authority responsible for small arms control and the authority responsible for the women, peace and security agenda, for gender equality, and other sustainable development issues. And then especially they committed to also harmonize the implementation of national action plan. For instance, if a state has a national action plan on women, peace and security, it is recommended to align it with a policy on small arms and weapons control or a national action plan on small arms and weapons control. And this is where we have seen some progresses in the last 10 years. States also are committed to submit voluntary national report on implementation of the program of action every 2 years. And these are the data taken from the reports submitted in 2024 in the last reporting cycle. And I can put in the chat box the link to the website collecting all these reports because they are publicly available. And I would like to highlight some positive trends because their report has a specific section on gender considerations, asking the states where they are with implementation of the measures that I mentioned before. And there are some remarkable progress since 2018 because gender considerations taken into account increased from 40% in 2018 to 74% in 2024, and this is at the global level. But if we take a look at the disaggregated data by sex, age, and disability, we see some setbacks. And these actually show us that there are challenges in compiling national data and also challenges at the national level to exchange data and information among different agencies. But there are still opportunities. So for instance, some states have also reported to increase the coordination of data collection between SDG 5 on gender equality and SDG 16 on the illicit flow of arms. and also an increased coordination among the national point of action for women, peace and security, and the national point of contact, for small arms electric weapons control. I also would like to conclude my intervention on related to the PoA progress with a quick reflection of the outcome documents of the latest review conference that was held last June in 2024, because the language on gender has been very progressive compared to the review conference in 2018 and compared to the previous biennial meeting of states. So the outcome document was very vocal in highlighting the linkage between misuse and illicit proliferation on small arms weapons with human rights violations, with gender-based violence, with conflict-related sexual violence. There was a call to ensure that international humanitarian law and international human rights law are taken into consideration in national small arms electric weapons transfer decision. And then there also was highlighted the linkage between the use, misuse, and proliferation of small arms electric weapons with also the issues of health, of the health of women, men, girls, and boys, that also contributes both a public and mental health concern. And all states also committed to provide comprehensive social safety nets for small arms victims and survivors. So this has been quite progressive compared to the discussion in previous years. And then once again, states committed to increase coordination with global agendas, SDGs, women, peace and security, and also to address gender roles and norms and expectations for women and men to acquire illicit arms, and also to address persistent barriers to the full, equal, and meaningful participation and representation of women in this field. And then also, if I have still a bit of time, I have another slide on some progress on gender and disarmament from a broader perspective, not only on small arms weapons control. For instance, just taking some data from the first committee of the UN General Assembly that concluded last year. I have few data that I would like to read for you with regard to women's participation in multilateral disarmament fora in 2024. So for instance, in the first committee, 38% of registered delegates were women. And this was a significant increase in the number of delegations headed by women, 46% in 2024 compared to 29% in 2023. And then 30% of the delegates who took the floor were women, only 1% more than 2023. So we need to do more on that. And 2024 marked the first time the first committee was chaired by a woman, Ambassador Marisa Chan Valverde of Costa Rica. And as you know, Ambassador Marisa Chan was also the president designate of the fourth review conference on the UN Program of Action last year. And I also had other few data, for instance, for the fourth review conference on the UN Program of Action, 29% of delegates were women, 20% of heads of delegation were women. And I also have few data that maybe I can share later on in the chat box. Also, maybe a few words on the Arms Trade Treaty that I've mentioned before. As I said, it is the first legally binding treaty that recognizes the link between the arms trade and gender-based violence, and basically states that are parties to the Arms Trade Treaty, they have the legal obligation to conduct due diligence and risk assessment process before authorizing a transfer of arms to prevent the risk of transferred arms being used to commit gender-based violence or violence against women. So this was a remarkable achievement at the multilateral level. But then at the implementation level, unfortunately, these article or provision of the Amsterdam Treaty remain one of the most challenging. For instance, until now, no state party has publicly denied arms exports on the grounds of the potential that weapons could be used to commit or facilitate gender-based violence. And export licensing officers conducting due diligence and risk assessment often mention the lack of specific data, right? Because sometimes it's difficult to assess these risks because there is a lack of understanding and awareness on risk mitigation measures related to gender-based violence. So this is actually a challenge that we are observing when we discuss with states that they want to comply with the Amsterdam Treaty. And I think that this is also could represent an opportunity for more civil society organization engagement that can actually work with export licensing officers and help them create a series of criteria that can actually lead and guide the due diligence process. So these are one of the areas that I would like to highlight that needs more coordination between states, the civil society organization, and also the private sector. And then, as you know, last year, a new framework was adopted, the new global framework for true life conventional ammunition management. And this framework has two specific objectives that relate to gender considerations. One is objective 14 on strengthening gender mainstreaming and the full and equal and meaningful participation of women for the ammunition management, but also objective 15, I would like to highlight here because it encourages cooperation with relevant stakeholders. So once again, states, civil society organizations, academia, research institutions, industry, so that the measures on conventional ammunition management can be more inclusive and also gender responsive. And I think these are with my last slide. So in terms of what the center is doing in support of these frameworks and also gender and small arms control. So what we do, we essentially assist the states to comply and ratify key treaties by providing technical and financial assistance, by also providing training. We had actually a standalone gender project on gender and small arms control that we conducted since 2020 to 2022. And in the context of this project, we train 180 government officials on gender and small arms control. And when I say government officials, I also refer to police officers, to army, custom officers. And we conducted this training in coordination also with civil society organizations that contributed to the curriculum of our trainings. And they also been trained on these issues. We provide policy and technical advice through seminars, consultation workshops, legal and policy review. We also develop guidelines and training manuals. In 2022, the UN Office for Development Affairs published an extensive and very comprehensive training manual on gender mainstreaming small arms control. IANSA contributed to this manual, as well as other stakeholders. And now we have a project on in support of the UN Program of Action on small arms weapons, which is funded by the European Union, and is also the framework of the workshop, this webinar that is being organized by IANSA. And this project has also a pillar on gender, on the gender consideration of the Program of Action. In terms of opportunities for engagements, I mean, civil society organizations for us is a key partner. When we organize all these events, meetings, training, publication, we always do in consultation and in close cooperation with civil society organizations. Here in my slide, you can see a photo taken last year in Kathmandu when we had the regional preparatory meeting for the fourth review conference on the PoA. And we had a good participation of civil society organizations. Last February, we had a webinar on the Arms Trade Treaty organized in collaboration with the Small Arms Survey. And we also had a good participation of civil society organizations. We also have a cooperation mechanism on conventional arms that is managed by UNRCPD, but is an informal cooperation mechanism bringing together UN agencies, civil society organizations working on conventional arms. And the idea is that we promote coordination among different stakeholders, and we meet regularly every 2 months. And as I say, it's an informal setting when we can just exchange ideas and update each other on our respective work. What else I can say? I think this was my last slide. I think I've taken already too much of your time, but happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ida. Let's give Ida a round of applause. Again, virtual round of applause. Thank you, Ida. For her last slide on questions, again, we do have our open forum towards the end of the session. So if there's any clarification that you would like from Ida, write them down, send them in the group chat, and we'll collect them for her to answer towards the end of the session. Before I pass on to the next speaker, and as our tech are preparing for the slides, so we see the clear efforts and progress in the inclusion of gender in discussions, commitments, and reports in the space of disarmament and arms control. And so to our participants, this is a good opportunity for you to check how are your governments doing with the representation and inclusion of women in the space of arms control and disarmament, and how are their commitments to the frameworks that were presented by Ida. So are your countries reporting on their program of action? Are they states parties to the Arms Trade Treaty? So hopefully you get to reflect after today's session. And I'm pleased to share and the space for towards our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ellie Kitomaki. She's program officer at the International Action Network on Small Arms, and she will be discussing emerging technology in small arms and light weapons. So Ellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you all the team, and good morning, I guess, to pretty much everyone, unless you're already living your afternoon. Here it's very early. I am trying to share my slides. Just a sec. Oh. Does that look good to everyone?
Yes, we see it, Ellie.
Yeah, okay. So I was asked to talk about technology, the developments of technology in small arms control. I understand that we sent a questionnaire before this event to ask what would be your main topics that you'd like to talk about. Gender was an obvious one, and Ida recapped that very well. And some of the others were specifically these technological developments and also youth. So let me try to cover the tech issue here in the next few slides. This is not by any means a sort of a new issue in small arms control. The first, at least recorded events of printed 3D polymer weapons date back to over 10 years, so almost 15 years. But still, the challenges that have been since posed and the potential benefits that the new technology can present remain limited. One of the very good outcomes, I think, was presented in the outcome document of the 4th review conference last June, where states decided to establish an open-ended technical expert group that will meet within the 2 next biannual meetings of states in next year and 2028. And the plan is to develop recommendations to ensure the full and effective implementation of the PoA and the ITI, the International Tracing Instrument, in light of these new developments. It kind of poses some questions. I mean, I think we should all ask ourselves of what does the increasing pace of development in these new and emerging technologies mean for the implementation of the UN PoA and ITI and other instruments that address small arms control, such as the ATT? And which measures, like concretely, should be taken to implement the commitments that states made during the RevCon in June last year? And obviously, from the perspective of IANSA, we are asking, what is the potential for civil society engagement in this process? I'm not saying I'll be able to give you any answers, but I wanted to just put these questions out there so that we can maybe all think about those together. I also wanted to say that it's kind of tricky. We tend to talk about these as new technologies. These are not necessarily new technologies. These are technologies, if we talk about 3D printing, I mean, it's been there for more than what it has been in the small arms sphere. So let's say 20 years, that's not new. Can we talk about emerging technologies? Maybe, but I don't have an answer to that either. But it's just something I'm personally happy talking about new and emerging technologies, but we should always keep in mind that these are technologies that have been there before. It's just maybe a slightly new angle that we're taking when we apply them to weapons. Still, most small arms, as you know, are produced with steel, but we should not close our eyes from the fact that more and more are also polymer, basically plastic weapons that are maybe at the moment not producible to the point where they could be manufactured in large numbers or durable, but the issue is there. And another important thing is that the small arms and the essential parts and components that are produced by using these new technologies are by default, if they're outside governmental control, they're in violation of the laws and illicit to begin with. And given the range of technologies, the effectiveness with which states and commercial actors can address these depends most importantly on two things. First, the states have to have the knowledge on the relevant technological developments. And second, they need to know which appropriate legislation and institutions to address this could be, to address the challenges and opportunities as they relate to regulating all the aspects and uses of small arms. Let me go to the next one if I can. What is sort of positive is that many states have raised the issue of technological developments in the recent meetings on the UN PoA, most recently at the RevCon 4. And there's a need, a clear expression of need to discuss this in more in depth. And it's sort of shown that it could create new potential for both the PoA and the ITI. But also, I think states have seen that these developments may create gaps and actually weaken the national control systems unless states are ready to adapt their regulative controls without delay. And it was also recognized actually at the outcome document of RevCon 4 that since the institutional and resource capacities and priorities of states vary significantly, there's a need to address the technological gap between developed and developing countries, however you want to frame that. What we are saying from IANSA's side, and it's actually in the paper that I'll share with you in the chat later, we'd really want all our members to actively support their states through information exchanges, research, consultations, promoting allocation of resources for the establishment of this open-ended technical expert group so that they could do the best that they can when they actually meet. And they should adopt a comprehensive approach to identify and address risks from the use of these new relevant technologies and assess concrete opportunities. And now, okay, we're in 2025, and in the preparation of the meetings of the working groups, we feel that states should increasingly work with all the relevant technical experts to identify areas where, in particular, the effective implementation of the UN PoA can be strengthened, and invite them to take part in these meetings. We also feel that states should increase efforts to develop programs of international cooperation, capacity building, and assistance to tackle the challenges that these, I'm saying it again, new technologies pose, as well as address the opportunities. There is an increasing need to improve the exchange of information and experiences, develop knowledge and techniques, as well as share best practices and views, taking into consideration the technological gap between, obviously, highly industrialized countries and others. Furthermore, states should, in our view, review their legislation on small arms in general, but be that weapons, components, accessories, to be sure that the legislation is ready to meet the new means and to take steps to enhance cooperation and also information exchange with industrial and private sector actors. It's actually, well, I keep coming back to this transparency issue, but it's really important to get more information about what is going on, where are we with this technology, who are the actors, what are the sort of threats, but also what are the possibilities that we could use to regulate them better if we knew better. So we are also campaigning for law enforcement agencies to receive more training and other support to effectively identify and use new technologies that would assist in the prevention of illicit manufacturing and trafficking of small arms, such as be that weapons or components that are currently being manufactured and traded without authorization using 3D printing technology and, for example, like the use of border surveillance technologies. But I leave that there and I look forward to getting your questions online.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Let's give Ellie a virtual round of applause. I think she really highlighted kind of like the double-edged sword of new technology and also validated the challenges which were presented by Ida, specifically on the limited data on what we know about small arms, about tech, and specifically in the region in Asia and the Pacific. So to the students, to the civil society in the room, perhaps you can consider maybe doing research, focusing research and investing in research opportunities on like data gathering, what your country is doing, how they're doing, and what kind of investments they are or production, I don't know, they're doing on related to small arms. And without further ado, we have our final speaker for this morning. I'm very excited to pass the floor to Mona Lisa Hazarika. And she will be speaking on youth and disarmament. So Mona Lisa is a UN Youth Champion for Disarmament and a Youth for Disarmament alumni. So Mona Lisa, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bianca. Let me quickly share my screen first, then get started. I hope you all can see it.
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, IANSA, for your very kind introduction and the invitation to join today's call. My name is Mona Lisa Hazarika, and I am a UN Youth Champion for Disarmament under the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs Youth for Disarmament program. Now, before we begin, let us first understand why youth voices are important in this field, in the field of disarmament, arms control, non-proliferation, and in the wider realm of international peace and security. Now, in recent times, there has been a soaring trend of engaging in dialogue exclusively with like-minded counterparts, where nation states are forging alliances and prioritizing shared ideological perspectives as a basis for engagement. Now, this has proven counterproductive as a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusivity excludes and diminishes the qualities and expertise that traditionally underrepresented actors offer. Now, increasing diversity in the disarmament space shouldn't just be a moral obligation or a good to have human resource policy, but a strategic decision to improve policy outcome. Having diverse voices in the discourse reinstates comprehensive perspectives, addresses systemic inequities, and also increases stakeholder engagement in decision making. And this is where youth come in. We currently have the largest generation of young people in history at around 1.8 billion, 90% of whom reside in developing countries. They represent ideological diversity and hold the capacity to infuse the field with new ideas and strategies where we revisit the fault lines of political topography and flag what has been overlooked. By finding new ways to organize and advance bolder solutions, young people are capable of anchoring the discussions around international peace and security back to the fundamentals and help refresh the stagnant debates around critical issues with fresh zeal and enthusiasm. Young people around the world have a pioneering role in raising awareness and devising new strategies to reduce threats from weapons proliferation and increase military spending, may that be from weapons of mass destruction or conventional arms. Now, as advocates and campaigners for peace, youth can take action for disarmament at all levels, may that be local, regional, or international. This includes creating grassroots level campaigns and peace building, lobbying policymakers and parliamentarians to implement just and transparent laws that prevent governments from patronizing the powerful weapons manufacturing lobby, and promoting the diversion of resources to essential sectors. Now let's move on to small arms and light weapons and youth. Now, small arms and light weapons have a disproportionate impact on young people. They're both victims and perpetrators of violence, and through their association with armed groups who recruit them as human shields and combat role, they are chronically persecuted, displaced, deprived of access to essential services, and subjected to lasting psychological scars. Their forced recruitment and indoctrination is associated with higher rates of school dropouts, negative impact on their cognitive development and opportunities to contribute to their communities, and also long-term marginalization. In fact, the 2024 World Health Organization study on youth violence estimated 193,000 homicides among youth between the ages of 15 to 29 every year, which is about 40% of the total homicides globally, and is among the leading causes of death for people in this age group. Now, across conflict zones, it's a known fact that young people are caught in the crossfire of collateral violence, while the widespread availability of small arms erodes their prospects for a secure and productive future. Now, Youth and Disarmament Non-Proliferation Arms Control, also known as DNA. So far, young people have proven their passion for the cause of disarmament by working at the forefront of successful international campaigns to ban landmines, cluster munition, and also nuclear weapons, which prompted the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to articulate youth as, quote unquote, ultimate force for change in his Agenda for Disarmament report, which came out in 2018. Now, in his 2021 report, Our Common Agenda, Secretary General stated that young people should be the designers of their own future, especially in proposal number 11 of his report, which is titled Listen to and Work with Youth. He has called for removing barriers in political participation and measuring progress through a Youth and Politics Index. The General Assembly also reaffirms the importance and positive contribution that young people can make in sustaining peace and security through its unanimous support of its biennial resolution on youth disarmament and non-proliferation, adopted in 12 December 2019 and 16 December 2021. The General Assembly Resolution 76/64 of 2019 reaffirmed the important and positive contribution that young people can make in sustaining peace and security, and Resolution 76/45 requests specific measures to promote the meaningful and inclusive participation and empowerment of youth in disarmament and non-proliferation issues, including through the effective utilization of dedicated digital platforms, which is the Youth for Disarmament program, and token grants and awards supported by voluntary contributions. Now, the first international policy framework that recognizes the positive role that young people play in preventing and resolving conflict, countering violent extremism, and also building peace is the UN Security Council Resolution 2250, which came out in 2015, and also known as the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, which highlights the gaining momentum and the pragmatic shift in the understanding of who young people are and their role in peace and security. While it is still in its infancy in terms of universal adaptation, youth across countries are developing and recommending a national action plan to their policymakers for its successful implementation. More recently, the Declaration on Future Generations of the Pact for the Future, which came out last year during the Summit of the Future in 2024, commits governments for the very first time to take greater account of the needs and interests of the future generation that should be reflected in their decision and policymaking efforts. Now, coming on to what can youth do in this space? As change makers and visionaries, I would like to call upon all fellow youth who are joining us today and also listening to us to include disarmament and arms control related considerations in their academic work and research by exploring its intersectionalities with various societal and development issues. So by finding ways to engage in scholastic engagements with your peers, you can help identify challenges, opportunities, and potential engagement avenues in this sphere. Further, taking the lead in establishing regional and global networks around small arms alike weapons control and sustainable development can help fill in the gap where such groups do not exist, or help reactivate such groups, societies, or clubs, which addresses the multidimensional aspects of DNA. Also, exploring where your professional trajectory and work stream intersect with arms control and related international security issues will help find that niche in this field. This will enable you to visualize and modulate the interlinkages to your interest areas and also make multifaceted contributions. I would also like to share some of the opportunities to engage in the field of disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation. And here are a few dedicated opportunities for youth to get started in this field, or if you are already working, to build on your current expertise. And all of them are currently accepting applications and are truly international in the sense. First would be the Youth Leaders Fund for a World Without Nuclear Weapons, known as the YLF. It is an innovative learning program aimed at equipping leaders for the future, which would be us, with the knowledge, skills, and network to join global efforts to eliminate nuclear weapons. This is phase 2 of the program, and initially it was launched in 2023 and is a joint venture of the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, UNODA, with support from the government of Japan. I believe the deadline for application is 13 April. So if you're interested, please, you should consider applying. I'll share the link for all of these in the chat box after my presentation. The second would be the Youth for Biosecurity Fellowship, which is organized by the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs in Geneva and in partnership with key international actors that empower youth in science diplomacy and global biosecurity. It was launched in 2019 as a biosecurity diplomacy workshop and is an initiative organized to provide a unique learning and also networking experience within the framework of Biological Weapons Convention. The third would be the Armament and Disarmament Summer School, which is organized by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, the Alva Myrdal Center for Nuclear Disarmament, EMC, at Uppsala University, Sweden, and the Odessa Center for Non-Proliferation. This summer school is aimed at supporting and reinvigorating disarmament education initiatives and is both a course and a networking opportunity for the next generation of professionals in this field. Another example would be the Minds Action Fellow Program of Minds Action Canada, which is a youth capacity building program and aims to increase youth participation in the implementation of the Mind Ban Treaty and the Convention on Cluster Munition. There are, of course, many more opportunities to engage and connect in this field, but these are just a few examples of what we could do as youth at this current stage. Finally, this is to provide some recommendations on how to meaningfully engage youth. And as future custodians of our collective vision, youth have the most to lose should the current crisis continue unabated, making it imperative to not just work for youth, but also with youth. As such, I would like to put forth the following recommendations for your consideration. Starting off with the youth mainstream policies. Now, instead of creating separate avenues or ad hoc committees for youth participations, arrangements should be made to integrate them into the existing workforce where they work and learn alongside experienced professionals. By recognizing young people as equal stakeholders and injecting greater attention into their training, education, and capacity building, states, civil society, and institutions can move beyond involving youth as a mere tokenism. We need professional work and career building opportunities and are ready to move beyond campaigning and advocacy roles. Second, sorry. Second would be adopting a regional focus, which is to establish regional and global youth networks or research groups around small arms and light weapons control, but also within the wider issues of DNA, which can help visualize and modulate its cross-sectional and mutually reinforcing relation with other pressing issues such as organized crime, terrorism, gender inequality, and human rights violation. Third, and I believe the most pressing, would be to have greater funding opportunities and addressing the biases. Now, funding and institutional support remains a significant constraint for youth that undermines their involvement, which may manifest as nationality-based restrictions on applications, visa denials, greater reliance on unpaid and volunteer opportunities, or scant or full life of school right scholarship. Now, reviewing institutional policies requires intentional and concerted efforts from a wide spectrum of actors, which will help understand the barriers to their participation, retention, and advancement. Further, taking stock of the role of youth in preventing small arms and light weapons violence can help access the efficacy of the existing initiatives and evaluate gaps for future strategies and plans of action. Now, this will assist institutes to standing up to their goal of being truly, quote unquote, international. Finally, emerging technologies. We are deeply concerned by the exponential advancement in small arms and light weapons manufacturing, technology, but also design, which is no longer at par with the existing regulatory instruments, especially in terms of polymer components, modular design, additive manufacturing, as well as the use of online platforms to facilitate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. As the first ever digital natives, youth enjoy the best access to information than any other group in history and are willing to collaborate on the efforts to counter the misuse and proliferation of such technologies. I would like to conclude by saying that the current and future generations of youth have to live with the consequences of our action or inaction, which is why I implore all relevant stakeholders to consider this issue with the utmost priority and act decisively. Youth are passionate and ready to take on the roles to co-create a more peaceful and just world and have just as much, if not more, at stake. Much is yet to be done, and the only way forward is through mutual respect, transparency, and trust. That's all from me today. Thank you so much, and let's stay connected.
Thank you so much, Mona Lisa. Can we give her a virtual round of applause? And to our three speakers, thank you so much for giving us a very insightful morning today. I do see we have questions already. We have one question in the group chat. And so this is the second most favorite part of every webinar, aside from taking photos, is actually asking questions to our speakers. And while we do have them in the room, please type in your questions. We will try to pull in 2 to 3 questions before we pass the floor back to our speakers. So if there are questions right now, please send them. We'll give you like 1 minute to type your question or reflect. Again, just some reminders also from our end. I know our speakers have been mentioning a lot of documents. We will be compiling all of this in a post-workshop like report, which we will be sharing to everyone who RSVP'd. And yes, so if there's anything that you've missed or any link that you wanted, we will try our best to share that after this workshop. So for questions, let's give it a few more seconds. Hopefully we have more questions in the room. We do have one already, and it's for Ida and Ellie. It's a long question actually. So Ida and Ellie, just prepare. um, for the others, let's see. If there are no questions, maybe we can start with this one first from the chat. So it's from Hem Basapa. So um they share that they have heard that there is a training manual on small arms and light weapons. But since usually the person delegated within a government is in that position for 2 or 4 years, we need to consider how to reach out to new people maybe yearly. So Ida, maybe something on that in terms of how to make how do we assure inclusivity in these trainings, and how do we expand the participation? And for Ellie is how do we keep track of emerging technologies and weapon systems, since the manufacturers are not likely to share this information? And of course, Mona Lisa, please feel free to come in if you also have like recommendations to this question. Again, everyone, please feel free to type in more questions, but I'll pass the floor now to our speakers. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you, Hambasapa. Nice to see you again here in this forum. Thank you for your question, but I believe your question was more a consideration, right? And you are right. One of the challenges that we face is the high turnover at the government side. So it is true. When we invest a lot in capacity building, then we take the risk that when we train officials, then the official, they will move to another department and they will move with their knowledge and with the tools that we provided to them. So we constantly face this challenge, and one of the things that we try to encourage to minimize this risk is to, first of all, to, as you rightly say, to extend the access to training to a larger audience. But this sometimes does not depend on our will. It really depends on our finances and financial resources. And as you know, right now, the United Nations is not living a very positive time in terms of finances. So we rely also on donors' contributions. The other things we try to do is to encourage states to have a national coordination mechanism or a national commission, or basically to create a system, some institutional memory, so that, for instance, if I receive a training, but then I move to another department, I can leave my knowledge, my documents, my material to the institution. So I don't take the knowledge with me, but I just transfer it to my replacement. So we are trying to encourage this mechanism. But again, also this solution clashes with some capacities from the government side. So I don't have the perfect answer, and open to any other suggestions you have. Also, not only you, Basapa, but the rest of the audience.
From my side, if I may step in, I totally echo what Ida said, and I don't know, I probably shouldn't say this, but when we were doing the first analysis of the PoA national report and the national coordination point, I was of the view that it should be personal and not an organizational email. But I was probably wrong, because as Ida said, the problem is that people move on. And if you use personal emails, personal contacts, people just go, and you sort of lose contact with the ones that you want to be in touch with. So I've since changed my mind, and I think it should be the contact point should be an organizational email or phone that people can call and contact when they need information. And that also links with the question about the tech developments. I mean, it's from civil society perspective, it's very difficult to see what we could do more if we don't have information. And the information only comes if there is cooperation between, let's say, the governmental actors and Interpol, for example, like where we can see that there have been misuses of the new and emerging technologies. So yeah, I don't have an answer to this, but it's an excellent question, to say the least.
You, Ellie, Ida, Mona Lisa, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, maybe I could reflect on the question posed to Ellie on how to keep track and how to stay updated on emerging technologies. As a researcher, and this is, of course, from personal experience, since I also follow that issue very closely, what I do is, first of all, to look for institutions, research institutions, think tanks who are working on this issue, who have a dedicated program, and we know that they will have information on it. For example, UNIDIR does focus on craft production, so does Small Arms Survey. And if you're really interested and want to get into the technical side and the more nerdy side, if I may, as a researcher, it's always good to have a more academic focus. So if you want to look for academic papers on a lot of journals, there are a lot of policy papers. What I have done in the past few years is also to set up like a Google alert. So anytime there's a news on 3D printed weapons, I get a notification. And what it does basically, even though these are just news articles, I get to look at the weapon itself and kind of cross-check some of the technical specification with experts that I have found throughout my career in this field. So if there's something that I don't understand, I'll just reach out to someone who has much more experience than I do in identifying these weapons, and we would together kind of see how and where this technology was used, particularly which components and parts was, let's say, 3D printed. How is it even possible? We try to get into the absolute basics of which particular technology or even element or material was used for this printing, and what was common and what was actually reported across multiple news channels. What was the focus of these reportings? Were they focusing on the person who with whom these weapons were found, or were they more concerned about the weapon itself? This says a lot about the topic at hand, but also as researcher, you can find where would you like to focus on? Is it the producer? Is it the product? These kind of things. But of course, this is all from a researcher perspective, and for policy circles, it might be completely different. For government and other law enforcement, also it might be different consideration. But if you're really interested into this, there are a lot of opportunities to stay engaged. It is a bit of a black hole once you start getting into this, and I'm sure Ellie can back me up on this, because there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much information which is not readily available, that you have to really dig through and comb through all of this technical guides, manuals, to like cross-check what are we even looking at, because a lot of these weapons have bended rules which were previously hasn't been considered yet. So it's always good to collaborate with maybe institutions or maybe experts that you have previously worked with, and try and maybe write something to produce that kind of knowledge, the kind of data that Ida was saying, that the data that we are missing, we need more of that data. And this is where I believe civil society, institutions, and youth, and just researchers come into, and to fill in that gap. But yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you so much. I was flagged that somebody raised their hand. Is Samuel Jose raised their hand to pose a question. So Samuel, if you can unmute and ask your question, please feel free. Not sure if they're not. I don't see them. Okay. So perhaps for while others are perhaps typing their questions, we would like to flag that perhaps we can extend for maybe 5 minutes since it's like 1 minute before the end of the session. But perhaps you can extend for 5 minutes so other people can send in a question. Most of the comments right now in the chat box are like words of gratitude. Thank you so much. We do have one question, so we can pull this question from the chat and this one on the screen. So from the chat, during the pandemic, UNODA offered the peace and disarmament education. Is this still continuing? It would be nice to expand the program, specific to young people and for women. And I think the question flash on the screen also kind of complements this question. So what are other ongoing and forthcoming efforts in the region that would be interesting for the people in the room, perhaps to consider joining or just looking out for? So passing the floor back to our speakers. Thank you so much.
Bianca, if you want, I can go first because there was a question related to the CPD baseline assessment. Okay, yes, we have a plan actually to have a reiteration of the study. And now we also are in the process of expanding our team. We will have a youth advisor joining us soon. If everything goes well, vis-a-vis the current situation in which we navigate right now. So one of her first task will be to do a reiteration of the study. And then also what I would like to invite you to do is to check our disarmament education dashboard. And now I will share the link where you can see all the online courses on disarmament education. But we also use this dashboard to highlight upcoming capacity building opportunities also in person, also in different formats. So I'm going to post the link, and I also now give the floor to the other panelists while I do that.
Sorry, Bianca, if I may step in, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Mona Lisa for filling in me in the reply. I mean, it's very important to get not only information at one point, but to be informed in time about, especially if we talk about technological developments. It's good to be on board when things happen, and yes, news reports, everything that you can get out from different sources is very crucial, because we all know that the governmental reporting is usually, it's like a year late, and it might be too late in some cases.
Yep, maybe I can jump next. This is in relation to maybe what Bianca asked, and also a few questions that I've seen on youth engagement in this field. I've shared the link for the Youth for Disarmament website, and Ida also shared the link to the disarmament education dashboard that we have. I think there you can see clearly the tremendous work that youth has done in this field already, whether it's in relation to nuclear weapons. A great example would be ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or the work they are doing across continents in terms of small arms and light weapons. The question is that how can we improve these efforts? How do we sustain these efforts and help them make more meaningful and sustainable in the long run? So I believe this is where my recommendations, I guess, fit in, and this is why I try to draft those recommendations. But also to the question from you, Bianca, on how do we stay engaged? What are the upcoming opportunities? The Youth for Disarmament website provides a lot of those. They also have an Instagram account if you want to follow that. It's called Youth for Disarmament. And also, this is all their current and upcoming initiatives are posted across UNRCPD and UNODA's Twitter and Instagram accounts as well. So in case you want to follow those up, those are also very good avenues. Otherwise, if it's not related to the UN system, there are a lot of youth groups that you could join on LinkedIn if that's what you're interested in, but also just keeping an eye on what's going on in the sphere, connecting with fellow youths, learning from their experience has proven to be very beneficial, at least for me, to get started and to keep working in this field. So I hope I answered your question, but yeah, back to you, Bianca.
Thank you so much, Mona Lisa, Ellie, and Ida. In the interest of time, and we don't want to kind of go overboard with our extension, we would like to say thank you to our speakers, and we will conclude the open forum for now here. However, if there are other questions, and we know we presented a lot of like information in the last hour and 30 minutes, again, we do have a post-workshop document which we will be circulating after today. If we get permission from our speakers, we will include contact information from them, so you can continue the discussions if you have other questions. And this is also the purpose of this webinar, is actually to start a conversation and then to continue it even when the webinar is over. So again, on behalf of the International Action Network on Small Arms, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you so much for staying until the end of the workshop, and we really appreciate it. We hope for many more opportunities of the like in the future. So thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend and have a good Friday. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ellie
Thank
and
you.
Mona Lisa. It was very nice being the panel with you. Bye. Bye, Bianca. Bye, everyone.